Good evening and welcome to the Civil Service Commission meeting. May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Here.
Commissioner McCarley?
Present.
Chairman Ukian?
Here.
For the record, Commissioner Carey and Gazarian are absent.
Okay. Want to first welcome our new board member. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, sir.
And what's next?
Minutes for the meeting of May 10, 2017.
Can we move on that one until we have another member of the, so we would have be able to vote on it? What's next?
Minutes for the meeting of June 14, 2017.
Is that one still the same situation?
I believe so.
Okay, then let's wait on that one as well. What's next?
Oral communications.
I have no cards. What's next?
Recruitment and examination report.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is our monthly report summarizing the recruitment and selection activity conducted by my staff. As you can see, we have approximately 6 members of my staff coordinating these recruitment processes. They're all listed by job title, department, the type of exam, whether it's promotional, open, as the filing period, the dates of the exam. As you can see, a lot of activity currently. As far as the scheduling of many exams, it does tend to be a little light in the summer months, but I think in September we'll have a lot more things scheduled. This item is a note and file item. If you have questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. If not, then this is really just for your information only.
Okay, let the records show that Commissioner Gazarian has joined us. And do my colleagues have any questions? Okay, we don't need a motion for this, right?
That's correct.
We can. Okay, what's next?
Minutes for the meeting of May 10, 2017.
Do I have a motion to approve and dispense from reading?
I move we approve the minutes.
Okay. Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gazarian?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley?
Yes.
Chairman Ukian?
Yes. What's next?
Minutes for the meeting of June 14, 2017.
Just for clarification, I think Commissioner McCarley will abstain.
Oh, that is correct. I was not a participant in the deliberations that led to those minutes.
Okay.
Minutes
Can
for
you
the
repeat that one more time, please?
minutes for the meeting of June 14, 2017.
Okay.
Move for approval. Second.
Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gazarian?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley?
Abstain.
Chairman Ukian?
Yes. What's next?
Eligible list established.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this too is a note and file item. This is our eligible list that have been established over the past month since our last meeting. As I always say, this is the sort of the culmination of our recruitment and testing process. After we do our process, we establish an eligibility list. As you can see, we have, looks like 6 lists that have been established. They're pretty much all promotional. Therefore, you're seeing smaller numbers of both applicants and ultimately very small eligibility lists. There is one recruitment that was promotional and open that had 39 applications, but for the most part, this is a promotional grouping of lists. Once these lists are established, as you know, the lists do go to the appointing authority. They get to look at the names and then make a final selection. So, again, this is a note and file item. If you have questions on any of these recruitment processes, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
Okay, any questions? I see none. What's next?
Class specification for approval, Police Services Officer Series.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a revised class specification series. It's the Police Services Officer Series. A few months back, the Commission approved the establishment of this series. It's a non-sworn job series entitled Police Services Officers. This was done, if you'll recall, in conjunction with a move to subcontract some of the parking enforcement responsibilities out and to take our existing staff who were classified as community service officers in parking enforcement and assign them to more enhanced responsibilities, including things like traffic control, school enforcement, report writing, including as well as some minor investigations. As this program is unfolding and we're actually still rolling it out, we did have an opportunity to make what I would consider another smart staffing decision by converting our court liaison position, which traditionally has been a sworn police officer position, by converting that position to a non-sworn position, which would be this police services officer classification. This came up as a result, I believe, of a retirement of the individual who was doing that work. So the intent would be to utilize now this non-sworn position, and to have this individual do the filings, the subpoenas, discovery requests, and more or less coordinate staff appearances in court. So. Again, this specification, as you can see from the underlined portion, is mostly just adding those essential functions relating to the court-related duties, and that's really the essence of this action tonight. So, if you have questions on this, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you. Sean Chavez from my staff worked on this, and we also have Deputy Chief Popolitis here today if you have questions.
I have questions. Yes, Commissioner Gazarian.
Thank you. I'm a little taken aback because I just want to make sure I'm reading the same item. Starts on page 10, correct?
Yes.
On page 10, towards the bottom of the page, this item tells us the police services officer assigned to the court service division would take responsibility for filing misdemeanor custody cases. Then when I read further and I get to page 12, the paragraph in red ink, is that an addition to
Yes, Commissioner
It is?
Gazarian. Yes,
It's an addition.
the red ink, the underlined portions are new.
And now in red ink, it's presents and files misdemeanor and felony cases with the district attorney's office. Further down on page 12, when assigned to the court services division, knowledge of basic rules of criminal and civil procedures. And on page 13, when assigned to court services division, ability to understand, that word to me is very vague, understand police reports and related documents. Whereas I dare say that plenty of lawyers do not understand police reports, I'm a little taken aback that a non-sworn personnel would be tasked with presenting cases for filing for misdemeanor and felony with the district attorney's office. My understanding, and as I'm sure this body is aware of through my line of work, is that when matters are presented to the district attorney's office for filing consideration, they're generally presented, as you correctly pointed out, at least with the city of Glendale, they have been in the past with the police department, by sworn personnel who are able to answer questions perhaps by the filing deputy district attorney and engage in intelligent dialogue, intelligent meaning informed, with a clear understanding of each and every element that goes into filing a charge, whether it be a misdemeanor or a felony. So I looked while you were giving us the prelude to this matter, I looked to see the experience or the education, and I did not see, unless it's there, and I didn't see it, I did not see what educational background are we requiring of this person who's a non-sworn personnel, perhaps a bachelor's in criminal justice or some measurable experience that we can quantify, though short of a peace officer, if you will. So I'm very uncomfortable with it. I'm happy to hear from anyone that may make me feel more comfortable, but I'm very uncomfortable with it.
Also, I think what would help is for people like myself who are not necessarily familiar with this process, for us to get, at least for me to get a better understanding, what is this? Is this person just handing a document to them, or are they presenting? So it would be helpful to get a better understanding of what the individuals.
Members of the commission,
If I
will have
might.
Deputy Chief address that.
Are we
Chairman Nukian, members of the Civil Service Commission, Carl Povolitis, Deputy Police Chief. This is, I think I can give you some comfort on this because the cases that we're talking about are not the sophisticated cases that require investigations. If you can imagine, for example, in reality, what our police officer was doing with most of our misdemeanor cases, those are handled by our patrol officers. So from A to Z. So let's just take a hypothetical driving without a license. So that's a misdemeanor case. The officer issues a citation. The officer does all of the Miranda work. What needs to be done at that point is the filing paper needs to be assembled. It needs to be signed. The evidence needs to be put together. And then they're literally taken, because we have lots of them, taken in a stack, and a filing DA goes through that. This is what we're talking about this particular function doing in terms of filing cases. They are not doing the sophisticated follow-up. So even like most for our driving under the influence investigations, again, those are all done by the officer in the field from the initial observations all the way through the arrest, through the Miranda, through the drawing of the blood and the booking of evidence. Again, this one, from this point, this person's job is to assemble all of that paperwork, get it ready for filing at the DA, make sure that the evidence is recovered from the lab, and then it arrives in court. So it's a lot more of it's the one that involves a lot of the rote work involved in that, and not the sophisticated levels of investigation. So when we have the cases where it requires follow-up prior to an arrest or that, those go to our investigators. These are the ones that they're basically ready to go when they're going there. And we had at that point it was a full-time police officer. This was our last fully permanently modified, accommodated position doing that. Right now, what we're trying to do is figure out how to make the police department work smarter. It's lawful for professional staff to be able to do this. We have professional staff that do this, and they're filling in right now while we have the vacancy. But it's not the level of follow-up. What you will see with the other positions is we are bringing those positions along, whether they're park enforcement or the other ones that are approved. We are asking them to do more, and so they will get additional training in this process so that we can move it forward. So we will have people who are qualified to do this. If there's any question or it becomes something that's more than sort of the routine, then it goes to one of our sworn investigators to handle.
May I?
Oh, please.
I'm encouraged by your explanation, Deputy Chief. My concern remains the red ink portion that refers to also felonies. Now, clearly, I know that I know, and you may tell me I was mistaken up to this point, we don't have somebody in our police department on a full-time basis whose sole position is to just take files over across the street to the DA's office. And if we do, then I wonder why it takes months and months for some of these cases that are born out of an arrest that don't get filed on time, and then they become letters down the line. But when we are going to have a non-sworn peace officer, an individual, a civilian, hand over files, that's one thing. That's essentially the work of a manager, a messenger who can just walk them across the street and hand them over. That's different, and I recognize that a filing DA who may have questions, rather than rejecting the presentation of the police report for filing, a good filing DA would ask for follow-up or would reach out to the investigators, as you pointed out, who may have gotten involved in the so-called sophisticated cases that are born out of an arrest more than a simple misdemeanor arrest. But we're inserting the word felony, and we're not making any qualifications. And to me, or to the naked eye, reading that, a felony can be anything, from a felony DUI to a felony, homicide offense. So I'm a little concerned still.
Our internal policy is felonies are assigned to investigators. This language allows some breadth and flexibility in the operation, and so in dealing with our labor associations, we don't work somebody outside of classification. But if I can add to the description here, sure. What we're looking at is creating a unit of 3 people, and it will have functions in addition to this. Because the other things that we have challenges with is providing discovery to the courts. Right. With the advent of digital audio recorders on the belt, video in the cars, all the police reports. So when we're talking about knowledge of police reports, it's not so much the in-depth knowledge of the police report, it's also knowing what you need to pull together for a discovery package so that we can free our other investigators to do the ones that require follow-up where somebody's not in custody and make more efficient use of their time. As I said, we actually have a couple of our professional staff personnel helping out in this, and a lot of it, as you say, it is filing because the case is actually completed by the patrol officer. Right. And so it's just a matter of assembling, putting it together, making sure the documentation is signed, because the person who's off duty at 7 in the morning, we're not going to make them go do there. And they will go in a stack to the DA's office, and the DA, you know, because most of them are now citations on misdemeanors, the DA will get to those within the filing period, and if they don't, then we get them back to issue a letter because it hasn't made it through the process fast enough. But if it's somebody who is not in custody, if it's a felony arrest, by policy those are assigned to investigators for follow-up.
And that begs the question, because you once again alluded to patrol officers who do the investigation, and we both know that when it's a felony, it goes to a detective bureau. Right. But yet this language here remains, and I understand the flexibility component that it is inserted in there for. I really do understand it. I have every bit of an interest as a citizen of this city to see that that which we believe is a crime is brought to the attention of the court and the prosecuting agency sooner rather than later to seek resolution and not to have potential criminals, you know, out in the wind. So that then brings me to my second concern, and my second concern is when we've initially approved the classification. To do that which Mr. Doyle put it much better than I could re-articulate. I don't recall us talking about the training component. We were simply changing titles, if I'm not remembering in error. And here now we are now taking these folks and putting them in a role that previously was handled by peace officers. So that makes me ask, what training are they going to receive? So when we say understand police reports and related documents, how do we know these people understand it? Is there some testing that's going to be done before they're assigned this task, or is there some training that they're going to be provided to understand police reports to the extent that is satisfactory to the management of the police department? Those are questions that I have.
Yeah, yes, they will be provided the training to understand what they need to do for the job. Okay. And in reality, look, this is a large department and a department that actually works pretty well together. And what's not being, the workload that will be taken by this position of filing the misdemeanor cases, and that's really the intent, is they are 99.99% misdemeanor cases that are going to go through, doing the discovery work, and then managing the subpoenas for the department. So all the criminal subpoenas coming in, making sure they get to the officers, and all of that timing and complying with the discovery in the time frame relieves our other sworn investigators to actually go investigate cases. So, but the training that will be provided to do this actually comes from our sworn investigators. So we have the processes in place where the training provided to these personnel, they will get the training that they need to understand it to the level to perform these duties successfully. It's not completely independent. Here, just go suddenly do this job.
If I understand correctly, based on your what you were indicating, this person is mostly in charge of as you said, providing the cases, and then there is no is there a presentation that this individual does to the district in convent?
No, in reality, most of the misdemeanor filings that I've described to you are not presented to a DA, and I think the way that Commissioner Gazarian is, where you sit down across from the DA and you're discussing that particular case.
Right, you just hand it over.
It's like we literally hand them over. They are the ones that they have been investigated in the field. They are the driving without a license, the misdemeanor cases that have been cited out, and they need to be assembled. The complaint needs to be signed by a representative of the department, and they are in essence ready to go as is right then, right there. And I said, when we're assessing where we are with the resources that we have available to us to make us as effective as we can, our assessment is that using professional staff to do this is a better investment of our resources than using a full-time police officer to do that. And that frees us up That frees up our full-time police officers not to be doing the discovery compliance. They can offload that to somebody else and interact when necessary. It allows us to get all of the video and that information retrieved. It allows us to manage our subpoenas and allows us to get these cases filed in a timely manner without impinging on a sworn officer whose caseloads are heavy enough as it is, and with our existing resources makes us that much more effective.
If I might.
Sure.
Yeah, I really want to commend my fellow commissioners for moving ahead on this absolutely right initiative to offload significant work functions from our uniformed sworn officers and move them to professional staff. We're certainly not the only city that has done this. Certainly our larger sister city to the south has pioneered this effort about 25 years ago. We're just pushing forward. This allows sworn officers to perform those functions at a much more sophisticated level and, quite frankly, to get out in the street and do what they're specially trained to do. I think the major objection that I hear, and perhaps there is a suggestion in order, is that the focus of one of my distinguished colleagues' questions really relates to the issue of both recruitment, the examination process, recruiting that person or persons who have the necessary and requisite qualifications and capability to perform a function that has a degree and necessitates a degree of real competence. Now, whether we make a decision, and I don't know if we can move forward and pen decisions already made with respect to this classification, that person be, this classification be an internal promote, so that we look for those individuals who have demonstrated, whether it's parking service or some other capacity, the requisite understanding of police procedures, or we mandate that we have a certain level of examination and perhaps a 2 or 3 step process so that somebody that comes over and comes on board as a public police officer, public services, or police services officer series can in fact progress to the ranks to rise to that level in which my fellow commission member has indicated requires the highest level of understanding.
It is our intent with this to do this as a promotional internal, okay. Because the folks that would be interested and have the requisite background, whether it's providing discovery, whether it's dealing with our audio and video systems and retrieving that data, actually work inside the police department. So whether they come out of our records bureau, whether they come out of parking enforcement, whether they come out of our investigative service where some of these folks are doing the exact things that are in here, that's where they're coming from. So when you kind of look at the police, this police services officers series, if you look at the parking enforcement, and as that title changes and as we move them to more sophisticated, look, we've had professional staff taking police reports over the years. So the burglaries that, there's not an immediate suspect or there's not a suspect on site, they take those reports. That's a good training ground. They become as familiar with those reports as a lot of police officers in that basic area. When we look at our records bureau, look, they read just about every police department report that comes through the department, and they provide discovery. And these things happen either in conjunction with or independent of our investigators. So they have that level of sophistication. And our current CSOs that are working in our investigations things, look, they're doing follow-up reports. They're helping with follow-up investigations. They're providing discovery. They're coordinating with the DA's offices. So that expertise exists within our police department, and we have the sworn officers who supplement that with training. Look, we want this program to succeed. It is necessary for us to move us forward to where this department needs to go to function in the modern world and with the resources that we have. And so we're not going to short the training on this position. It is worth it to us to invest in those people to do this job very, very successfully.
Any other questions? Okay. Do I have a motion?
I move for approval.
Second.
Okay. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gazarian?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley?
Yes.
Chairman Manoukian?
Yes. What's next?
Class specification for approval, IT applications manager.
Okay. Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is the establishment of a new class specification for this title of IT Applications Manager. This is a position within our Information Services Department who will be overseeing all of our various computer applications citywide. These would include such applications as GIS, ERP, which stands for Enterprise Resource Planning, some of the applications that are used in the police department and the other public safety departments. Pretty much every department citywide has some type of specialized application, a computer application, which has to essentially work within our organization effectively. This is a position that has to have extensive knowledge and skills in those areas, and it's a fairly important responsibility. The classification was formerly used for this was a senior GIS manager, I believe, or senior GIS project manager. But the individual who formerly held this position and has since left actually ended up taking on other applications in addition to GIS. So it's kind of again, another, I would say, a smart move here to have a sort of a broader applications title and list of responsibilities for this function. As you can see from the organization charts, and the last page of this item, the various functions and areas that this person would be overseeing. So, again, it's a new title, a new classification that was approved by the City Council, and again, this is the specification for that. Our intent would be to go out and do an open recruitment on this, which we often do that in our IT department, and conduct that recruitment in an open fashion. So. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer those for you. Ms. Abramian from my staff worked on this along with Brian Ganley, who is our Chief Information Officer, and they're both here today. So,
any questions from my fellow commissioners? I see none. Could we have roll call, please?
Move to approve.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gazarian?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley?
Yes.
Chairman Nuki?
Yes. What's next?
Job bulletin for approval, fire captain.
Mr. Goldberg.
I was waiting for you.
Sorry.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is a job bulletin for approval. This is unlike a specification. It's a little different. The bulletins are developed from our class specifications, and it's essentially what we use to advertise and ultimately post our job openings. You'll see like the specific filing periods, the current salary, things like that on the bulletin, as opposed to the specification. As I've said this before, not all bulletins are required to come before the Civil Service Commission. There are a couple circumstances where we do so. When we're taking a job that was formerly recruited for on a promotional basis and making it open, we'll bring those to the Commission for approval. If it's a public safety promotional type of a recruitment, such as fire captain or police sergeant, or in this case, fire captain, those have to go for Commission approval. And then anytime we deviate from the approved class specification relative to any duties or minimum requirements, those have to come before the Commission for approval. So in this case tonight, this is a bulletin that is consistent with its approved class specification. The reason you're seeing it is because it is a public safety promotional exam. All of the exam components are similar to those that we previously utilized for this position. And one other note on this, because last month's meeting, the July meeting, was canceled, and we needed to post this bulletin to fit in with our schedules or the fire department's schedule for operations, training, vacations, things like that. We did seek approval from the chair. I believe he was out of town, but he was kind enough to grant provisional approval for us to post this with the provision that we bring it back to you today. So this was posted on July 27th, and it was intended to close on the 28th, but I'm sorry, July 17th it opened. It was intended to close filing on the 28th, but we had some busy summer with fires and people away, and so we actually extended the filing to August the 4th. But as I said, this item is consistent with its class specification, and we're seeking the Commission's approval for its posting. So, again, Mr. Chavez from my staff is here, as well as Chief Fish.
Any questions? Yes.
Thinking back to the previous exam we had with the police captain and the doing away with a citizens panel as part of the oral interview process, I wanted to make sure on this one that this is not deviating from past practice in terms of including a citizen panel on the oral communication as part of this exam. So I don't know whether Mr. Doyle can answer that and assure this commission that we are not approving a change or the omission of a citizens panel on this particular exam.
Correct. Mr. Chair, Commissioner Vine, this position does not typically utilize a community panel. This is
That was going to be my question.
Police captain is a upper management position, a lot of community involvement and presentations and such. But fire captain is the first line supervisor at the fire station. They have typically an engineer and 2 firefighters reporting to them, whether they're on a truck or an engine company. So we have typically not utilized community panels for this position at this level. The ones above it, typically we will, the management levels, but this is a GFFA level position. The focus here truly are number one, our tactics and making sure that the individual knows how to, deal with emergency situations, whether it be a medical or a fire circumstance. As such, you'll see the examination components are focusing on tactical. There's an oral board examination process, and there's also supervisory component because, again, this is the first level they're actually supervising, so we want to make sure they know how to do the fundamentals of supervision. But as far as a community panel, we just haven't done that at this level.
That always throws me off because the captain on the fire department is a different. I mean, as the police, it's like in my mind automatically it's like one level before the chief. But can you explain the fire department? It's a little bit different. There's how does that work? What's above the captain?
Mr. Chair, the ranks, I'll go from the bottom. You have firefighter, then fire engineer, then fire captain, and that constitutes your typical fire company at all the stations. Those stations that have a truck and an engine will have 2 separate companies, each headed by a captain. And all the stations have, essentially that complement. Above captain, you have battalion chief, which is typically assigned to oversee all of the various stations on a particular shift. And then above that, we have a deputy chief, and then above that, we have the chief level. And we typically do, again, the community panels at those managerial levels, chief, deputy chief, and sometimes with the battalion chief as well.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Second?
Okay. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gazarian?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley?
Yes.
Chairman Okian?
Yes. Thank you. That was a very good explanation, when you explain it that way. Thank you. What's next?
Job bulletin for approval. Deputy Fire Chief, Verdugo Fire Communications.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is similar to the last item. This is a bulletin, not a specification. The bulletin is for Deputy Fire Chief / Verdugo Fire Communications. This is somewhat of a unique circumstance. The individual here will oversee the Verdugo Fire Communications Center, which I know the Commission is well aware of how that operates. That's our regional governing emergency dispatch operation that consists of 13 separate agencies, 13 cities that make up Verdugo. Again, this is being brought before the Commission for 2 reasons. One, the last time we did recruit for a deputy chief, that was done promotionally. This we're proposing be an open recruitment. The second reason this requires Commission approval is that to some degree it will deviate from the existing approved class specification for deputy fire chief in a couple of ways. And again, given the fact that it's specialized for focusing just on Verdugo fire communications, from that standpoint, it's going to be specialized and focused in that one area, as opposed to what a typical deputy fire chief would be in charge of. And in that regard, some of the traditional fireground certifications that we would normally require at the deputy chief level are not going to be required for this, because the focus really is going to be on dispatch communications as opposed to firefighting. Also, we really do want someone with extensive managerial experience, so we are asking for 3 years at the chief officer level, as opposed to deputy chief is typically 1 year at that level. And when we say chief officer, we're referring to the battalion chief
I was going to ask you that. You saw my face.
one level below. So that's, yeah. So I think the battalion chief requires 3 years as a captain, and deputy chief requires 1 year as a battalion chief. So in this case, for this bulletin, we're asking for 3 years. And we really are looking for someone with very strong leadership and managerial skills to come in to this operation, and not only oversee the dispatch center, but also have the ability to deal with all the regional players in this Verdugo system. So it'll be a very high level position in the organization, and a key assistant to Chief Fish, but we believe at this level we will probably get a lot of interest and really some very strong candidates. So from that standpoint, that's why this is being brought before you. If you have questions, I'm sure you do. Ms. Hunanian from my staff worked on this bulletin, and as you can see, Chief Fish is here as well. So.
Yes.
I have the same question I asked on the captain. Now we're up to the deputy. And I know that this is qualified by saying Verdugo Fire Communications, which may throw it into a little different category. But the thing that concerns me on the bulletin says, upon request, represents the fire chief at meetings, administrative matters, and before commissions, boards, and other agencies. And then it also says, may serve as acting fire chief as directed, which, again, I'm wondering whether we're doing away with the citizens panel, which is, again, typically at this level is included in the examination process to make it a level playing field and keep in line with what we've done in the past.
Sure.
So,
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Devine, I'll probably have Chief Fish address that, but as you'd indicated, this is not your typical deputy chief. There's not going to be the typical level of engagement with the community that we would ordinarily expect of a deputy chief and even a battalion chief. As far as how Chief Fish wishes to utilize him, or the candidate, didn't mean to say him, in his absence, maybe he can elaborate upon that.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this position is really going to be a person that's taking over not just the 13 agencies outside of Glendale, a total of 14 agencies that Verdugo dispatches for. It's going to be a lot of technical information. So as it relates to the dispatch center, being able to deal with calls as they come into the dispatch center, especially when you have large incidents, brush fires, large structure fires, like the one last week in Arcadia that went to a third or a fourth alarm. Those are the types of things that create complexities for our dispatch center. So we need to have someone with the experience. And so that's one of the reasons why we have the 3 years of experience. As it relates to a community panel, my intention for this position is this person is rarely going to, if ever, going to be in front of a community panel or in front of the community. Their main job is to deal with the community of the fire service. And so I don't see the nexus between the need to have a community panel, and we're not trying to usurp that process. What we're trying to do is we're trying to make this process to where this is a very technical job. A dispatch deputy chief is going to be someone that is going to be doing technical work in the dispatch center as it relates to managing, leading, and bringing the people up to the speed of where they need to be so that we can operate effectively in our dispatch center. I'm hoping that answered the question. If it didn't, I'd be more than happy to answer specifically.
Yeah, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just a comment and perhaps a question. Jurisdictionally, Chief, the Verdugo Communications Center is a joint agency to which several cities, certainly Pasadena, Burbank, and Glendale, contribute. So there's a
13,
budget.
right? You said
yeah, 13, but a budget line item. The authorities of that commission, are they related directly to Glendale, or do they have their own charter, meaning as a joint agency responsible to all? Because that begins to sort of lay out specifically what sort of command and control that you are really requesting here.
I may be able to respond to the question of whether or not they're a joint powers authority.
Yeah, that's basically where I'm going on it.
They are not. This initially started as a
Glendale.
contractual agreement between Glendale, Pasadena, and Burbank, and they are the main contributors budgetarily to the costs, and they are the main decision makers.
Mm-hmm.
The other agencies participate as subscribers, essentially.
To use an inappropriate term, who owns the center?
The three
city of
cities:
Glendale?
Glendale, Burbank, and Pasadena.
Okay, so it is a tri-city.
Correct.
It just so happens that Glendale, by reason of historical precedent, has become the responsible agent for the purpose of conducting personnel actions.
Correct.
Do those personnel actions relate not only to the command staff up there, the Verdugo fire manager, and the communications director or chief? Do they go all the way down to the individual who's working on that radio telecom board?
You are correct, sir. That is exactly how it works. The fire communications operator, which is the entry-level person in Verdugo, will report to the fire communications supervisor, who reports to the center manager, who will eventually report to the deputy chief. So, yeah, as it relates to day-to-day supervision, the deputy chief will report directly to me. As it relates to getting their direction from, they will get direction from the three chiefs from the three different cities. General direction.
But following question is, that deputy chief, the bulletin for which we'll probably inevitably support, wears that uniform?
We'll wear it, yes, we'll wear this uniform.
Okay. But for my edification, this is an open examination, and there can be a realistic expectation that some of the applicants could extend from the fire chief, regional fire chief for the U.S. Forest Service, to somebody that's been recently assigned to the city of Philadelphia as a deputy fire chief.
Absolutely, yes.
And the only thing I suppose, this is a comment, I'm not even sure if it's completely appropriate, is that this is a dual function job. And I think what might concern us is the fact that due to the elimination of certain requirements, including some of the academic courses that you painfully, no, you brilliantly went forward and gained the appropriate certifications. This particular deputy chief does not have to go through that rigorous level of training and incident command and all those other things that we speak about on a daily basis.
As a requirement for this particular position, no, because they are not going to be operating in the field. They'll never be a field officer commanding a fire in the field. They will always be inside the dispatch center as it relates to dealing with whatever comes up in the dispatch center.
And that's an absolutely perfect answer. The only thing is, it suggests that when one of my distinguished colleagues indicated that this particular individual could, based upon this bulletin, stand in as you in a case of crisis, then all of a sudden we're looking at man or woman who might not have the requisite command and control skills that you and the present deputy chief have. And that's why I think, I can't speak for Mr. Devine, Commissioner Devine, but I think that that's one of those areas which we are concerned. This is a high visibility job. It could be, not initially, but it could be tomorrow.
And point well taken, very well taken. And so the answer to that is very simple. My expectation for this position is that as it relates to all things Verdugo, all things within the center, that person, whoever he or she, that deputy chief, will be the decision maker in my absence for Verdugo and Verdugo alone, have nothing to do with field command, have nothing to do with the Glendale Fire Department decision making, strictly a Verdugo and in my absence, let's say I'm out of the office or away from, on vacation, and there's a decision that has to be made, that decision will get made on my behalf by that deputy chief.
Within the command,
Within the confines of the communication center, yes.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McCarley. With that in mind, is it possible to modify the bulletin, these two paragraphs to say exactly what you just said rather than the general terms in terms of may act as acting fire chief as directed, and then include the qualifications,
within the confines of
limitations,
absolutely.
And the same thing on the paragraph above, upon request represents the fire chief at meetings, et cetera, within the confines of the Verdugo operation.
Sure, absolutely, we can do that. I'd be fine with that. I mean, that's...
Okay.
Mr. Chair, do you want a motion to that effect?
Yeah, as soon as
All right, I'll move.
1 second, let me...
Stand corrected.
You'll
It's
say.
okay.
I do have one more point I'd like to
No
make.
And I
Again,
have a question.
I'm still, concerned about the examination process, and that's
Okay,
one
that's
of our
good.
responsibilities. So I'd like to get something put in this bulletin to indicate that this process for the bulletin we're approving right now applies only to the deputy fire chief assigned to this position, that it will not set a precedent or a standard for any future exams dealing with a deputy fire chief. And if we can get wording to that effect, Mr. Doyle, I'd appreciate it, assuming my colleagues go along with that.
I think everyone's on the same page on that, and I don't see any problem. You okay with that, Chief, as well?
I'm fine with that,
Okay.
yeah. And again, that's the expectation, that's the intention.
Sure.
And if we need to spell that out in black and white, I recommend it. Yeah, I think that's a great
Perfect.
idea.
No, he
Yes.
addressed that which I was going to ask about. Thank you.
Yeah, and my comment to you is really, really applaud you for doing a phenomenal job with the fire department and then the direction of this department.
Thank you, sir.
Previously, a lot of people have talked the talk, but are actually doing it, so congratulations.
Well, thank you very much, sir.
Do we have a motion?
So moved. Actually, Mr.
I made the motion.
A little bit too early, but perfect.
I'll second that.
Second, okay? Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine,
Yes.
Commissioner Gazarian,
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley,
Yes.
Chairman Okian.
Yes. Thank you, Chief. What's next?
Reports.
Mr. Chair, all we have on the reports would be the late performance evaluation report. And for the benefit of our new commissioner, this is a note and file informational only item that indicates department by department the performance evaluations to which departments have any performance evaluations that are late in their filing. As the commission is well aware, this is an area that we take very seriously. We do, I think, a very good job keeping our various departments on their toes relative to the serving of evaluations in a timely manner. And the commission, I believe, is responsible for a lot of that emphasis and have traditionally asked for this report to appear at each meeting, and thus we have them listed. As you can see, the departments, there's quite a number of them. I'd say the majority have no past due evaluations for this month. There's, it looks like about 6 that have a couple of past due and that are on first notice, and we have one that's it's actually on fifth notice, but that evaluation has been served and has been dropped off at our department just prior to this meeting, and thus we're satisfied that that's been taken care of. So,
Any comments, any concerns, questions? Okay. What's next?
Civil Service Commission, staff comments.
I want to welcome Mr. McCarley to the commission. Thank you.
Absolutely. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions or anything else? We're done? Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
We're adjourned.